Awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Law City's Progressive Legal Journeys event. Law City is a platform that connects aspiring lawyers from low socioeconomic backgrounds to the legal sector, originally in London, but now globally. And we do that through various workshops that we do and events like this, and also through our thought leadership on our website. So if you want to get involved in our student ambassador opportunities or just connect with us, you can visit us at www.lawcity.co.uk. And you can also follow us on social media at lawcity_ on Instagram, at lawcity_ on Twitter, and at lawcity on LinkedIn. And also engage with us. Tell us what you're loving about this event and let us know any questions that you have that might not be answered today, so that we can progress and move that on to the panel. But I'm going to start now by getting the panel to introduce themselves. But before I do, I'd like to say thank you once again for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedules to provide some insight. But I'll start with David, if you can just give us a 2-minute brief introduction about what you do and who you are.
Thanks, Dorothy. Very happy to do so. And really great to chat to everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us. This great big yellow thing in the sky is a bit weird and causing some sort of strange behavior. So I'm glad you've all chosen to join us rather than go and partake in that. So I grew up in South Africa, spent the first 2 decades of my life there, and then qualified as a South African lawyer. And joined Linklaters in 2001 as a newly qualified. Spent 7 years in London working in the leverage finance team before being made a partner, and moving out to Hong Kong as part of the global financial crisis or the reaction to it, and then spent 12 years working out in Hong Kong, 7 years as a partner at Linklaters, and then 5 years as a partner at Kirkland & Ellis, before returning to London last year and coming back into the market, and delighted to be back in London and at Linklaters and talking to all of you.
Awesome. Thank you for making that really quick. Julie, can you do the same, please? Just introduce yourself and tell us what you do. You're on mute, Julie.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll try again. Sorry. I was going to say I've got a background in IT as well. You'd never think it, would you? So let's start with the introduction again. Hello, I'm Julie Taylor. I'm a partner in the family team at Spencer West, which is based in London. I've only recently joined in January, so it's taken me a while. I started my law career out in the provinces, and I've now come into London, which is a slightly different route to most people. I'm 8 years post-qualified. I've had a very varied work life in that I left school at 16 to work in a bank, and I went on to IT and then law. My family background is that no one in my immediate family has been to a university. None of them have professional careers. I grew up in a council house in a single parent family. I've always had a strong work ethic, and I am where I am today to sheer determination, hard work, and I have taken opportunities as they arise. It's not been an easy or straight path, but it has been quite fun, to be fair. Thank you. That's me.
Awesome, Julie. Thank you so much for that introduction. And lastly, but not the least, Andrew.
Oh, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much. I'm based in the northwest of England, near Manchester, and I too have a big yellow thing in the sky outside, and for me it's quite a rare event, so I'm very pleased you could all join us. I had a slightly circuitous route to the bar. I started off as a student in 1985, which seems like an awful long time ago, as indeed it is. But instead of just doing my degree and going to the bar, I ended up doing a master's degree, and then I ended up teaching for a while as an academic lawyer. I was given a studentship to study at the Inns of Court School of Law, which at the time was the only place one could do the bar course. And they basically said to me, well, either you stop being an academic and come to the bar, or you can forfeit your studentship. So I decided to train for the bar, ended up at the Inns of Court School of Law, and then took a pupillage the year after in Manchester Chambers, Dean's Court. Spent my first 10 years at Dean's Court before moving to what is now King's Chambers in Manchester in 2001. And then last year, immediately before the lockdown, I took Silk in London, and now I'm practicing commercial litigation and arbitration as a Silk in the provinces in Manchester, although I am also a member of Silk Court in London. That's me.
Awesome, thank you, Andrew. So we've got quite a range of sectors, and also we've got both barristers and solicitors on here today. So my next question is, why law? That's a question that many aspiring lawyers get all the time, but why law? And also why the sector that you're currently practicing in? And I think I'll start with Julie this time.
Thank you. Well, why law? That's a very good question, because I definitely didn't start here. My first career was in IT. I was an IT contractor. I did that all through my 20s, and then the stock market took a bit of a dip in 2002, and there simply weren't any jobs for IT contractors at that time, or not any that didn't have a degree. What I found, and my husband at the time, he neither of us had degrees. We'd worked up to where we were, and we worked in financial institutions. We'd worked in the Netherlands and Spain and Paris, but we came back to England and there weren't any jobs available. So I thought it would be really wise for one of us to diversify. And I decided that it would be me, because I didn't particularly like computer science. I could have taken a degree in that, but I wanted to do something that was very interesting. I had previously studied a BTEC in business and finance, got a distinction in law. So basically that's how I chose. I wanted a long-term career that wasn't going to dip. There was always going to be some work there for me to provide an income. So that's why I chose law. And why family? Well, that I think you find most lawyers don't necessarily practice in the area where they started out. I had a commercial background, IT. All through my studies, I studied commercial, banking, intellectual property law, employment law. And whilst I did start my practice in employment law, because of the way that I had to get my work experience, one of them was family law. And then I also found, because I was in my 30s by the time I was starting out on law, I found myself going through my own divorce as well. And basically, as a result of that, I'm now practicing family law. So it's not a straight path, but there we go. That's me. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you, Julie. And then same question to Andrew, why law and why the sector that you're currently practicing in?
There's a number of factors. I think, if I'm brutally honest, I think I've always enjoyed arguing, particularly arguing a case, trying to convince people of things. And I thought, well, what's the best way I can do that? Be a barrister. And my dad was a high street solicitor, so I had some sort of knowledge of the legal sector in general terms, but very little knowledge of a bar. And so I started to find out a little bit about it, and that sounded quite interesting to me. Why the commercial area? Well, as I've already told you, I started out life as an academic. And so I wanted really to engage in an area with a high legal content where you can use the law to achieve the best possible result for your client. And the conclusion to which I came over a period of time, because I started out doing a little bit of everything, was that commercial work was the best for that. And regularly now, well, most of my cases certainly involve quite complicated legal issues. So that's why I chose commercial. And also there's another factor for me in dealing with commercial dispute resolution. And that is this. If I'm honest, while I pride myself on doing the best that I possibly can for all my clients, I'm very aware of the serious commercial implications of success or otherwise. I find, or at least I for myself find, it easier to give objective and dispassionate advice when what is at stake is money rather than the liberty of the individual or their kids or their house. So I do my best for my clients, but because it's about money, I find it easy to give objective and dispassionate advice. That's me.
Awesome, thank you, Andrew. And then David, same question to you.
Yeah, thank you. This is one of those interview questions that we often ask recruitment people that we're recruiting when they come in, and the sort of answers we expect are those that Julia and Andrew have given, very carefully thought through and considered answers. Mine is much more meandering and less considered, and probably wouldn't result in me being hired by Linklaters. Back in the 1980s, there was a great law TV program called LA Law, which was very sexy, and I thought law was very sexy, so I thought I'd have a go at that. My mother is a teacher, and I'm the only child of a single parent, and so there was really my sort of realm of experience was pretty limited, and all I knew is that I didn't want to be a teacher. And so LA Law looked like a great thing to do. So that resulted in me sort of applying to law school and getting in and training as a lawyer. In terms of finding the the career that I've ended up with, again, it was more by accident than design, and a little bit like Andrew's own experience. I found some of the the personal interactions on both the family side and the criminal side just too taxing from an emotional perspective, and so in a way hid from that and went into commercial work, and just kept going.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. So my next question is, at the outset of your career, did you think that you would progress to the level that you are now? I mean, you're all leading in your fields. Did you think you would get as far as you are now? And if not, what was the turning point for you? I'll start with Andrew this time.
I think prior to going to university, I had absolutely no idea where I would end up, how far I would end up, whether I'd be a success or otherwise. I did read, if I'm honest, I did reasonably well at university, and as I said, I ended up teaching there. So I suppose at that stage, at least I knew there was a reasonable prospect of getting into decent chambers and doing reasonably well there. However, life at the bar is really often a question more of luck than design, and much depends on the cases in which you've been briefed as to whether or not your profile rises, whether or not you get exposure in good cases. I was extremely fortunate to work as a junior barrister for a number of years with one of the most successful QCs outside of London. And in that role, I ended up appearing in international litigation and arbitration, which at least for a non-London based practitioner is still quite unusual. I also, I suppose, became aware over the years my reputation was rising with the local judiciary and otherwise, and I felt I had the profile and I suppose the status to make an application for Silk, and I was fortunate I was successful. So there's no one turning point. It was a process over a number of years in which my profile gradually rose, which work I was getting was gradually getting better, higher profile, and I decided to make an application. I'll say fortunately I was successful. So that's where I am now.
So I'm just going to throw in one more question there. Do you think there was any particular skills that you had that helped you along the way?
Hard work, the ability to use law to good effect and imaginatively, and a degree of self-confidence, because you cannot succeed at the bar without believing in yourself. Because if you don't believe you're a persuasive advocate, I can assure you nobody else will. So I think those are probably the three key points I would make.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. And then I'll go to David next. Did you think you would progress to the level you are at today? And if not, what was the turning point for you?
No, absolutely. I did not think I'd progress to this point in my career. For large periods along the journey, I felt deeply insecure about my position and where I was going. And to some extent, that insecurity drives you onwards and makes you more focused on what you want to achieve. Was there a turning point along the way? Probably not. I mean, I think I pick up on what Andrew says about there being a fair amount of luck involved, being in the right place at the right time. Now, when I made that point to one of my supervising partners at one point, I just said, look, I've just been incredibly lucky in terms of where I've ended up. And they turned around to me and said, you actually make your own luck. Luck is sort of the confluence of preparation and opportunity. And, with a lot of hard work and making yourself available to be there to be lucky, it sort of comes to you. So, no specific turning point, just sort of, I think, hard work and being there at the right time.
Awesome. And you mentioned the feeling insecure. I think some of us, well, we hear often imposter syndrome. Will you say that's something that you had to deal with, and how did you deal with it?
Really interesting question. So joining from South Africa, as a South African qualified lawyer, at the time, less so now, speaking with a sort of strange accent, and really working out how to fit into the city. And it was, real adjustment, trying to work out how you related to people and did fit in. I think in some senses, it was much easier for me doing that coming from a Commonwealth country than if I'd come from a lower socioeconomic background. Speaking with an accent that couldn't be classified at Linklaters was probably a lot easier than coming in with a deep Mancunian accent or something that fits in less easily. And the place that I joined in 2001, was very of a certain, very much of a certain type. I think that the institution has changed a lot over that time, and so has the city.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And Julie, same question to you. At the outset of your career, did you think you'd progress to the level that you are at now? And if not, what was the turning point for you?
I think if you're talking about my working career, I had not a clue that I would end up in law and B, a partner. And I think it's because I came in, I was quite shy and insecure, I would say, at school. And then it was just a case of through my working experience, I gained confidence. Whilst I knew that I didn't have a degree all through my 20s, I was working with people who did. I mean, we worked in international banks. So I think my confidence grew that at the start. So therefore, at the start of my law career, I knew that I'd worked with this caliber of people who've been to Oxford and Cambridge or wherever, and that I knew that I could compete with them. So I think at the start of my law degree, because I was doing it in my 30s, I knew that I wanted to get a first class degree. I knew that I wanted to be the best that I could be, and that I felt confident then that I would be able to progress. To be fair, when I got my LLB, I did the bar course, so I have been called to the Inner Temple, but I didn't manage to get pupillage. And I had a young family, so I then cross-qualified to be a solicitor. So it's just a meandering journey, but it's been fun. And I agree with David, the luck, you make your own luck. It's a question of confidence. Imposter syndrome, we all have it at some stage, if not even now. And it's just about hard work and determination. And taking those opportunities that arise. I found there are lots of very kind people that will give you opportunities if you're willing to work hard.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. And you mentioned hard work and determination there. Will you say those are the key skills that lawyers need to progress, or what additional skills would you add, if any?
Yes, I think they are key skills. I think all lawyers will say we work really hard to do what we do. We work very long hours occasionally, or lots of times. So hard work, determination, perseverance would be the third one. To keep knocking on those doors and to not be put off by any rejections. I mean, I made countless applications for training contracts and pupillages. I've had countless interviews. So it's just a question of perseverance as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Julie. So the next question is, what advice would you give to the old you starting out in your legal career? And what advice would you give to any aspiring solicitor or barrister starting out now? I'm going to start with Andrew.
I'd really hoped you weren't going to start with, because this is a hard one. And I think it depends at what stage the old me we're talking about. If you're talking about the old me prior to going to university, it would be get as much on your CV as you possibly can, because the marketplace is now so competitive that whatever you can do to stand out from a crowd is really important. Certainly at the bar, and I suspect with the solicitor's profession as well, academic excellence is now pretty much taken for granted. If you haven't got a 2-1 or a first from a good university, it's going to be difficult in many chambers at least to get your face into the door for an interview. So really work as hard as you possibly can. But certainly when I'm looking for pupils, and I have been involved in our chamber's recruitment for a number of years now, we're not just looking for academic genii, we're also looking for well-rounded people. So the more you can do to show that you're an interesting person and stand out from a crowd in that way as well, the better. I've graduated. What advice would I give myself? Well, I've already said self-belief is tremendously important at the bar. You've got to give the appearance of complete certainty and conviction, and try not to be distracted by motorbikes driving past your window as well. Self-belief is the utmost importance. So that's point one. Secondly, and if this goes without saying, and I'm sure my fellow panelists will agree, work as hard as you possibly can on every case that you do. You are only as good as the last case that you've done. Every case matters. Work hard assimilating the facts and on researching the relevant legal principles. For a successful barrister, you have to have the confidence of the tribunals before whom you appear. As a practitioner based in Manchester, I appear before relatively few judges on a very regular basis. And it's really important you have their confidence. If you take every point that is possibly available to you, both good and not quite so good, you will rapidly lose the interest and confidence of your judges. Select the best points and take them as well as you can take them, but do be selective. And the judge will come to trust your advocacy, which makes life an awful lot easier. So I hope those are some useful points.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. And Julie, same question to you. In hindsight, knowing all you know now, what advice would you give to the old you starting out in your legal profession?
I'd say start earlier. Don't leave it till your mid-30s. It was a hard journey to transfer over, I suppose, which is why we don't underestimate the work that you need to put in to do it. So yes, if I could have gone back, I would have done things differently. And if I'm at a careers fair and I'm talking to younger people, it's just get the best grades that you can do. When you're studying, do it in a subject you love, because you're bound to get a really good grade. And it doesn't matter what degree you have to actually transfer over to law. You can do it at any stage in your life. So I think that would be it. Don't be fazed by any knockbacks and rejections. We're all going to get them in whatever we do in life, but just try to take that rejection or knockback, have a think, redirect yourself and carry on. Do your research, network with people who possibly can help you along the way. People are very kind and they will help. Get as many pupilages or work experiences or something else which will show that you're a well-rounded individual as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. And lastly, David, in hindsight, knowing all you know now, what advice would you give to the old you starting out in your legal career?
Well, those are both excellent answers, and I endorse everything that was said there. I think again, as the distinction was drawn between being a graduate and applying to get into the job market versus when you're applying, what you really are doing is trying to maximize opportunities. You're trying to put yourself in the best possible place to get a job. And, as has been said, good academics, a broad-ranging CV, a real desire and expectations these days from, the top law firms is that people have been thinking about a career in law for a long time and have been much more considered about it than I was. So you've got to start quite early. You've got to start accreting your CV, developing it, and showing that you have a sense of direction and determination, because there's some very focused, determined people out there who want to get into the big city jobs. So, I would say that would be the way to go about it. I was very lucky in the sense that I fell into it, but I wouldn't be that lucky this time around. So I think that would be the sort of first observation. And I think as an associate, I was very fortunate to have great mentors, people who picked up on me and looked after me. And I think creating the internal network within the firm, making sure there are people you connect with. I think sort of displaying empathy when you're working as a commercial or transactional lawyer, understanding people and connecting with people is hugely valuable, and it's something that will drive you through your career. The hard work and determination is an absolute given. You do have to work very hard if you want a career in the city, and that does require an awful lot of personal sacrifices. And it's not always clear that making those sacrifices is the right choice. So as you go through your career, you need to sit back and consider whether this is the right balance, whether you do mean to be sacrificing as much as you are on the personal side of things. And sometimes the balance tips the other way, and a career outside of law is a better idea. But so long as there is career progression and fundamentally you're having fun and enjoying it, keep going. And I think the fun and enjoyment is a key part of what we do. And working with great, intelligent people, we're exceptionally fortunate to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. We are going to go into the Q&A section shortly. I've already had messages asking if you can ask questions. Feel free to pop the questions into the chat room and they will get answered during the Q&A session. But one more question. We know that diversity and inclusion is a major issue within the legal industry. Being leaders yourself, what do you say can be done by law firms to improve diversity and inclusion? And I think I will start with Julie.
Thank you. I think we just, in law firms, we just need to be all inclusive. It's all about the CVs, what people can do, not about any differences in backgrounds. Anybody can come from anywhere and become a lawyer. So I think we just need to keep open-mindedness. And I think there are many, many successful lawyers that have started from humble beginnings. And being involved with projects like this can only help. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. I think I'll go to David next.
Look, it's a massive point, and something that the the big city law firms and the city in general really need to engage with. There is a slow turning of the tide in terms of the change at the top of the profession, but through the more junior ranks, there is much more diversity and inclusion now. And with Linklaters in particular, and actually at Kirkland as well, which is another large law firm, there was a real emphasis on attracting and retaining the best possible talent. And that talent is not necessarily the best educated, and you need to look, wherever that talent may come from, look with an open mind in terms of the sorts of people that could thrive in the institution, and make it a diverse and inclusive place, so that not only are you attracting great talent, but you're keeping people too. And ideally, the top firms need to match the demographics of the population, and certainly from a gender perspective, a place like Linklaters is behind and needs to do a lot more. But there is a lot of emphasis on this internally. It's part of our internal culture and brand to really promote diversity and inclusion, because we want to have a great place to work. We want to take our social responsibilities seriously, and we want to have fundamentally the best people in a great environment, and to do that you need a diverse and inclusive workplace.
Thank you so much, David. I'm just going to ask you one more question. You touched on being able to attract diverse talent, but not being able to keep them. What do you think is the cause for the lack of retention of diverse talent at law firms, particularly the top firms?
It's a really good question, and I'm not sure that I have an answer to it. I think people leave for different reasons. It is sort of top city law firms. It is a fairly punishing place to be as a junior lawyer, and I think particularly so if you don't feel socially connected to the people around you. So I think a lack of inclusiveness is something that's going to exacerbate the already demanding conditions that you face when you join as a junior lawyer. So I think fostering an environment where people feel supported and included is critical. So I think that's something that our firm certainly is taking very, very seriously.
Awesome, thank you so much. And lastly, Andrew, what do you think leaders can do to improve diversity and inclusion within the legal industry?
I think there are two significant issues, as have already been indicated, really. First of all, recruitment, and secondly, retention. In terms of recruitment, I think the most important thing that we can do is meet with young people, both at school and university level, and certainly from a bar's perspective, we have always been very much in our ivory towers, not terribly good at communicating with people and spreading the existence of a profession, let alone anything else. So I think really we need to engage with particularly schools in more socially deprived areas, introduce the bar to students, show them that we're human beings and we too talk the same language as the students do, and become more welcoming to persons from all backgrounds. In terms of retention, the number one issue at the bar at the moment, unfortunately, is gender. Recruitment to pupillage is 51% roughly female, 49% male. However, by the time you get to 15, 20 years call, the proportions are very heavily skewed towards men. And the reason for that, I think, probably is that life at the bar is unforgiving. It's particularly unforgiving if you wish to take any significant time off work, and or you have primary child minding responsibilities. We need to introduce more flexible working patterns, and we need to facilitate women coming back to the profession after a period of time to bring up children. So I think those are the two issues that are probably major.
Awesome, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, David and Julie. We've come to the end of our panel session. It's been awesome, and I've definitely taken points away from everything everyone has said. As I mentioned earlier, connect with us on social media at LawCity_ on Instagram, and visit our website, www.lawcity.co.uk. I'm now going to pass over to Cody, who is our events lead, and he's going to take us through the Q&A session. I've already seen some great questions in the chat room, so I'm excited to hear what everyone has to say.
Thanks, Dorothy. And thank you again to all of our panelists and to all our attendees for turning up tonight. It's great to have you all here. So I'm just going to start with the Q&A now. If you're feeling particularly brave tonight, just pop your hands up and I can let you start speaking. You can ask your questions. If not, we've got some questions in the chat, so I'll start going through them in turn. So our first question is directed at Andrew this evening. So it was mentioned, you mentioned each case being important, and it becomes even more important when you're approaching becoming a QC in the applications with that. And it asks, how do beauty parades work, and what degree is networking an important part of winning a commercial work? And then just lastly, within that question, is it easy to pick up these soft skills once you start your pupillage? And especially if you come from a background with no family or friends in the profession, do you think that, again, is a bit of a knockback, or do you think it gives you some?
Well, raises a number of issues, and I'll try and deal with each of them in turn. Beauty parades. Well, there's no standard format, but in my experience, what happens is you're invited by a solicitor and lay clients, often at board level and below, and you will be asked a series of questions as to your experience, which is relevant to the case. And they will gauge two things. They will first of all gauge whether or not you have the relevant hard skills for the case, and secondly, whether they can get on with you for however many years the case is likely to go on for. So there's no hard and fast, but broadly speaking, that's certainly my experience. How important is networking? Well, certainly in my chambers, a junior barrister will be given so many cases. They'll be in court 4 or 5 days a week and will meet numerous solicitors, and you will get a broad range of contacts at a very early stage. And so whilst networking will certainly be of assistance, you will be introduced to a large number of solicitors really from the word go. Is it easy to pick up the soft skills? It's not so much easy, it's inevitable. You will have to get on with solicitors with whom you deal on a regular basis. You will necessarily pick up the skills you need to engage with those solicitors and lay clients. Otherwise, you will ultimately not develop a substantial practice. So I think you will have the opportunity to develop them, and you will develop those skills. My advice, I suppose, is take as much advice as you can from senior members of chambers. If you don't have family, friends, and other persons whom you know who might be able to assist you. Certainly in our chambers, senior members are very happy to help, guide, provide you with, and assist you to obtain the soft skills you'll need. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think if you get into good chambers, you will develop the necessary skills to be an exceptional barrister.
Great, that's great answer. Thanks, Andrew. And another brilliant question. So I'm just going to move on to the second question from Sarah, who is a paralegal in a family law firm. And this question is for Julie. And she asks, what advice would you give when you're in the early stages of your career? And what is the top tip for a successful career going forward?
Okay. Well, I think as a paralegal, I don't know what stage you're at or what qualifications you have. So I think just get as much experience as you can in the paralegal role, and get involved with as many cases as you can possibly whilst you're there, because make sure it's known that you're eager and you're keen and you want to take on roles. For instance, is it children applications, is it divorce, is it finance? Think about what route you want to qualification. You're a paralegal, but do you want to become a solicitor? Do you want to become a barrister? Do you want to go down the Silex route? You can do on-the-job training, so to speak, becoming a chartered legal executive in order to get qualified. And I do know a fair few paralegals who have been that for many years and have chosen not to become qualified. You will limit yourself as to what you can do and what cases you can take on. But if you want to be successful as a family lawyer, you need to learn empathy, which sometimes you have, but you can learn it. And if you take on any counselling skills or psychotherapy or psychology in any particular qualifications, all of those will help you be successful in your career. And we've touched on networking as well. As a family lawyer, not only do we have our clients that we deal with, we also need to point them to therapists, financial planners, accountants, pension experts. So we deal with many different professionals, and it's about networking, building those relationships with all of those different types of people so that you can give your client the best possible journey through their very difficult times. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Julie. I think that's a really important soft skill that not many people mention is, you know, you're also counselling in some ways. And I think that's really important to kind of flag that up and how it applies. I am now just going to turn to Maria, who has her hands up. So if you could take yourself off mute, please.
Sorry. Hi, everyone, and thank you to the panelists. It's been very insightful. I am an international student and I have just completed my first year. I'm going into second year in September. I wanted to ask for advice or tips that I could do during the summer, just to build up my CV readiness for vacation schemes. If that makes sense, yeah.
Great. So how about we start with David this time, and then we'll...
I'm possibly not the best qualified, just having been out of the London market for a while and working out in Asia, so a little bit out of the flow on you know, the vacation scheme system. The one thing to say though is that most of the big city law firms do have very advanced vacation schemes in place, and you know, if they're not putting feelers out into the universities, you'll certainly be able to look on the websites and get a sense for, you know, what the vacation schemes are. If this is pre-vacation scheme, a little bit harder. You know, actually almost anything that shows drive and determination and you know, the willingness to work hard will be valued. So, you know, when I look at a CV, you know, seeing somebody has worked in a restaurant, actually, that itself can be important. If they've done that during their studies to pay their way through school, you know, that itself is something that's important. So anything that I think that does show a degree of drive and determination is going to be valuable. But if you can connect in with the within the law firm's vacation schemes, then that's obviously more helpful. But perhaps Julie or Andrew have more useful insights.
More useful? I don't know. I would say yes. Yeah, I think I would just reiterate what David said. Really, I don't know whether, but if you can't get into the top firms, just remember all of the other firms, because if you can get any work experience with any of the law firms wherever you may be, there are many sole practitioners or smaller firms that may just be looking for a bit of additional help through the summer period. We all have employees that there's lots of holiday, so we need some sort of cover. So I think actually don't limit yourself just to the top firms or wherever you think you want. If you're struggling there, aim a bit lower and just keep knocking on doors. But again, as well, I just think, yes, the working in the restaurant, being a waitress, all those client-facing skills that you learn. I mean, I was a waitress. I've worked in a bar. What else? Investments. Oh gosh, I won't go into all of the many jobs that I had all the way through, but it builds all your soft skills when you realize all those customer relation roles. So anything like that is very helpful.
I mean, there's not much else I can add to it. I entirely endorse what's already been said. I suppose specifically for the bar, do mini pupilages, both in London, outside of London, in various areas. So when you come to be interviewed, you can say, well, I want to do this area of work because I want to practice here because. So I'd recommend a wide variety of mini pupilages without going mad. If you want legal experience, but you can't get into a solicitor's office or mini pupillage, think about assisting a law centre or a CAB. Anything you can show, use to show that you are interested in the law, you work hard, anything along those lines would be of assistance, really.
Brilliant. Thank you for them answers. They were great. Okay then. So just had a new question come through. and this one is for David. So what would you say the main differences in your experience as a partner at Linklaters and K&E, and if you had any supervisory roles over associates or trainees, and do you think there were any differences in the opportunities that were provided?
Well, that's a great question. Quite a tricky one as well. I mean, Linklaters and Kirkland are quite different beasts. You know, Linklaters historically a UK firm, Kirkland historically a US firm. Linklaters is a very grand old firm. You know, it's 183 years old, and has, you know, as you may or may not know, referred to as part of the Magic Circle and very prestigious in its own right. Kirkland is an old firm, but started in the early 1900s in Chicago, primarily as a litigation firm. And it's only really in the last 2 decades or so that it's become, you know, a real global powerhouse. And that has been off the back of private equity restructuring litigation. And it's much more a sort of scrappy upstart, very, very hardworking, very meritocratic. And partly, I think, is because, as a result of coming from Chicago, you know, a little bit blue collar, sleeves rolled up, get things done, very focused on business and business generation, and very, very effective at doing so. It's a phenomenal law firm, but very focused on, you know, earning money. Linklaters has a bit more softer edges to it than K&E. It's still a hard commercial law firm, but it is, you know, it focuses a lot on internal culture, on collaboration, on teamwork, on training of people. So moving on to the second part of the question, we place a lot of emphasis on training and development of associates from, you know, actually from trainee and before trainee and through the LPC, etc. There is, you know, huge amount of emphasis on, you know, courses, external training and development and opportunities being provided to people, much more so actually than typically at the US law firms. The US law firms, you train on the job. you work long hours and you work hard, and you learn as you go along. You know, each has their own advantage. What we've tended to find is we hire at Linklaters tremendously talented people, train them exceptionally well, and then they go to the US law firms. So that's how the US firms get their talent. But it's there is a cultural difference, I think, certainly in the UK, between the emphasis placed on training and development with the UK firms versus the US firms.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think this next question might be best for Andrew, because I know you said you went into teaching for a while. So it mentions, would you recommend taking the LLM or the bar itself? Or I know you can do the combination, so.
Is there any advantage in doing a master's degree? Well, yes, if you want to stand out from the crowd, providing it's a relevant area. If you want to do an LLM in public international law, very interesting, but probably not terribly relevant unless you can get a first in it, in which case you can demonstrate your academic excellence by virtue of doing it. Really, it's the same as anything. Anything you can do that makes you stand out. If you can get a first in your first degree, if you can get a distinction in your LLM, if you've got an LLM, anything that separates you is a good thing. Bar is a really deeply academic profession. We really do value academic qualifications. And if you can stand out from a crowd by virtue of your academic qualifications, do it. I don't really think there's much more I can add. The short answer is yes.
Brilliant. Okay. So we've got one more question actually, which has come through. So, do you think it would be too late to switch from the LPC to pursue the bar if somebody has just completed the LPC, or would you say that's still possible?
I'm not sure who that's ideally suited for. I suppose it might be me. The short answer is, if you can provide an explanation as to why you are where you are, not a problem at all. You've got to have a convincing explanation for why you've done what you've done. If the answer you come up with is, well, I've had a bit of a change of mind, well, if you can explain it, maybe, but it's not the ideal starting point. You'd have to have a good explanation for why you now want to be a barrister, having done the LPC. And it's got to be a positive explanation, not a negative explanation. I mean, had I told my interviewers when I applied for the bar, the reason I didn't want to be, well, I wanted to be a barrister because I didn't want to be a solicitor, because I'd seen my dad in his office and it didn't appeal to me very much, that wouldn't really go down terribly well. So everything has to be positive. You have to explain why you're doing what you want to do.
Brilliant. I actually have a question. So this one's open to all three. So you've all worked really hard to get where you are, and you've all come from different backgrounds. How would you say the transition was from your starting position to where you are now? Do you think, like, how did it feel fitting in? Did you feel like it took some time to get you, your feet on the ground?
Shall I start? So yes, it's a learning process. I think from my career, from my law career, from the start, and I'll have to apologise if you can hear my puppy in the background. So it is live, isn't it? There we go. Sorry. So yes, it's a question of, again, it's building confidence. It's learning as you go. It's taking on more knowledge, because I know there's a reason it's all called practice. Is because we're always practicing. There's new developments in the law all the time. We develop new skills. You handle one case one way when it comes through, you might change it and do something else the next time, because you learn from all of your colleagues as well as you go through. So I think it's a big learning process.
Andrew next.
I'm not quite sure how to answer this one. Yeah, it's absolutely a learning curve. I started out doing a bit of everything, and I gradually decided what I wanted to do and push myself in a particular direction. Over the years, I felt more and more comfortable doing commercial practice and less and less inclined to do anything else. So yeah, it's a learning process. You eliminate what you don't want to do. You channel yourself in the direction you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right, and it reflects, my own journey, which, as I've already mentioned, wasn't mapped out in advance. I didn't have the idea in advance of working in a big city law firm in London. I started off actually doing my training contract at a relatively small firm in South Africa, and that was simply because I had no real insight into the legal world. I had no connections, no family members, no one who could say, actually, you should be aiming a bit higher. Once I was there, then I started soaking in the information, started learning, started realizing that I didn't like criminal law, that I wanted to learn more about commerce. So bought The Economist and subscribed to the Financial Times, and started just soaking in information, and then learning what the top city law firms were in London, and applying to those firms, and luckily getting offers, and then joining those firms, and then soaking information and learning and driving yourself forward. So I think it is about making yourself available to opportunities, learning where you can, and doing what you enjoy.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. I think that's one of the important things to mention, really, is that you're always learning, even when you are at the higher up levels. It's always an opportunity to keep growing and developing. You've not just reached your final goal when you've got to the top. So yeah, thank you. That's it. Just adds that bit of inspiration. So thank you for that. So we might have time for one more question if anybody has one, or if anybody has anything else to say. No, I don't think we've got any more. Dorothy, have you got anything else to add, or?
I wanted to ask a question, but so I want to know, what has been your favorite case you've worked on so far, And it doesn't have to be a case where you think everything's gone well. Maybe there was something that you struggled with and you learned an important lesson from it. I know this is a bit, a difficult question to ask, so I might give you some time to think about it. But I'm going to start with Andrew because he deals with loads of cases constantly.
Okay, yeah. This really tells you how boring I am. It was a case that concerned illegality in contracts and the enforcement of contracts and when you can and when you can't enforce them. And it involved technology, which is probably familiar to all of you, automatic number plate recognition technology. When you drive into the supermarket and you overstay your welcome, you get fixed with a fine. Well, one particular company was in the habit of sending out 4 letters. First one saying, please pay up. The second one saying, really, please pay up. And the third most significant one was, well, if you don't pay up, we're going to sue you. That third one was a deceit. There was no real intention to sue. And at first instance, the judge decided that there was no dishonesty, but that amounted to the tort of deceit. And the question was whether or not that rendered the contract between the supermarket and the installer of the ANPR technology unenforceable. Because the law in relation to illegality until fairly recently was very uncertain, but was certainly authority for proposition that if the contract was going to be performed in an illegal manner, the contract was unenforceable. Well, the matter went to the Court of Appeal, and it was held that the contract was enforceable notwithstanding the illegality, because it would have been a disproportionate sanction to render the agreement unenforceable. And that involved 50 pages of very closely worded and difficult legal submission in the Court of Appeal. So that was probably my favorite case. But as I say, that probably says more about me and my boring attitude to work than anything else. But it's probably the most academically difficult case in which I've been involved.
No, I love it. It's very complex and it's something that I personally would have loved to work on. So I'll go to Julie next. What was your favorite case and what stood out about that for you?
Okay, well, I'll have to be a little bit sensitive about my issues because it's a family law case. But I have had one recently where the husband basically up sticks and ran off with lots of money. And we had to, and left wife with nothing after 30 years of marriage. And he tried to abscond. I like to use that word. He tried to abscond to another country. Well, he did abscond, but we managed to get some freezing orders in there. So it can be quite fast paced, family law. We have all sorts of things that crop up. So we managed to get justice for the lady. And I did quite a lot of work on that on a pro bono basis because, well, she didn't have much money. So I think that's one of the most enjoyable recently. And she's got a fair outcome. I apologize. That's Milo. And she got a fair outcome in the end. So I think that's nice. And the lady was very, very emotional. And it was a 3-year journey to see her through the whole process. So it's just nice at the end of the day to see her in a much better place.
Case, it's not always about the money, and also the fact that it was a family law case, because I guess working for individuals can be that much more rewarding and feel more intimate once you achieve a result for them. But lastly, I'll go to David.
Thanks, Dorothy. So as a sort of commercial lawyer, we don't really do cases. We work on transactions and matters. And I've got one that I enjoyed, which I'll come back to in a minute. But I think for me, if I interpret your question as, what have I enjoyed most about my career so far? I think it's really been having the opportunity to be involved in building a business. And there is within the solicitor's profession, real opportunity to grow something quite special. You're not just sitting there doing legal work. You are hiring people, you're training people, you are meeting clients, you are developing a business, and you're earning money. for the firm, and that has been over my time at Linklaters in Hong Kong, at Kirkland Ellis, at Linklaters in London. The most gratifying thing is bringing other people along, growing the business, and growing client relationships, and that is the fun bit of the job. In terms of transactions, I think the one that I quite enjoyed was we're acting for a global private equity firm called Carlyle, who bought the McDonald's franchise in China, which was very interesting, getting to see how the whole burger making process was constructed, and how they were sourcing the ingredients in China, and how protective McDonald's is of their brand, and the licensing arrangements that go with that. And interestingly, for the financiers that were lending against the asset, it was almost like lending against a toll road or a utility. The revenue stream was just so dependable, and with slight increments in the pricing, you could change the financial model. So it was very interesting getting under the hood of McDonald's in China. But that's all I can offer.
Thank you so much, David. Again, another transaction I would have loved to work on, not only because it was McDonald's, but because of the complexity. But thank you. That's it from me. Cody, would you like to round up?
Brilliant. Well, thank you again for all the questions tonight and for all the answers. You've all been amazing. A lot of insight, a lot of inspirational stories. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. Like Dorothy said earlier, you can follow us on our social medias and keep engaged with everything we're doing. This recording will also be uploaded tonight, so if there's anything you missed, or you missed any parts, you can check back and watch over that. So thank you, and have a brilliant rest of your evening whilst the sun's still out.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.